taking a quick break here. So I was thinking about something from the Bible that, like in the Old Testament in Genesis, where it says, sons of God saw the daughters of men, and they were fair, and they took wives of them. And then it says, and there were giants, and there were men of legends. So I used to just think, okay, well, one of the Ten Commandments is thou shalt have no other gods before me, so there must be other gods, right? So, but then this thing came up about UFOs recently, UFO conspiracies, and the government confirms UFOs, and then some people saw a giant alien standing next to them, and then later they decided that was a demon. And then there's this one guy who's like, yeah, of course aliens are real, but they're not from another planet, they're from another dimension. And then it goes on to say, like, well, the word they like to use is Nephilim, which the word simply means giants. It's an old word for giants. And we know Goliath was a giant, but we know where Goliath came from, his people. And we can trace his people back to the people who separated when Noah, his kids, and their kids had kids. They separated and went different places in the world, and these lands are named after these people. So we can trace Goliath, a giant, a Nephilim, back to Noah, and Noah all the way back to Adam. So we know that they're human, and they do not have a supernatural being. So this theory is that the angels saw human women, and they're like, oh, they're nice, they look beautiful. I think I'll just quit being an angel of God and go take a wife from one of these human women, because of course having a relationship with a woman is much better than being in heaven, right? With God Almighty. It just doesn't make any sense. Like the ultimate glorifying God in the presence of God, and that's not as good as you would leave that to as a woman, take a woman for a wife. It's just ridiculous. But I just always had an issue with that verse. I was like, man, I hate that verse because I don't understand it. So I researched more and more, and Christ himself said that angels, like this whole concept of angels having sex with humans and there being corrupt flesh being giants was also from a sect of Jews or Hebrews that lived like around 300, man, is that annoying noise? They lived about 300 years before Christ came, and wrote the book of Enoch, which the book of Enoch is the word is pseudepigrapha. What pseudepigrapha is a book that's written in the name of someone else, so it's basically a forgery, right? So the book of Enoch is impossible for it to have been written by Enoch, because Enoch lived before the flood of Noah, and the flood of Noah, we have no writings from pre-flood era whatsoever. We do have a recording through Moses, when Moses, if you remember, lived in the time of Egypt, and that's around where the time where the Bible that we have today started being written. Man, this place is noisy. Anyway, so okay, so I had an issue with this verse because I'm like, it's not really possible for there to be other gods, because there's only one God, and as we look in Exodus, God punked all of our gods. They have no power. So how could they have the power to, like, fallen angels would have become false gods? They're supernatural beings that have a relationship with a human and produce a demigod, like Perseus, Hercules, giants, I guess, if people want to say. But I'm like, I started getting to know some Mormon people and studying the Mormon doctrine and what they believe and how far off it is from the Bible. And they also believe that humans, like God was once a human, Christ was once a human, and humans can do good, and then like Christ was not even wasn't even he was human at once, and we became angels, and then we became gods of our own world according to Mormons. And so you get your own planet somewhere. There's a lot of problems with this because God is a spirit, and God lives in the spirit world. He is a non-corporeal being. This corporeal universe in which we live in is like a VR for God. Like, it's like a simulation. It's not a simulation, but it's corporeal. It is not supernatural. God created everything from nothing because he's a supernatural, and he exists outside of this with his angels. But the realm of the angels is also some form of, it's not physical, but they have some form of bodies. But angels do not need to reproduce. God created as many angels as there are ever going to be. There is a verse somewhere that kind of numbers them, but it says thousands and then thousands of thousands, so it doesn't really give a specific number of how many angels there are. But there's a lot. But they don't reproduce or marry, as Christ said. So the sons of God are the daughters of men. So if it's, as Christ says, that the angels married them, right? They saw the daughters of men and took wives of them, and there were men of legend, and there were giants. So if angels can't marry, don't marry. Even God did not marry Mary when he formed Christ in her. He just moved over her as he did like when he made the earth. He moved over the surface of the deep, and then later on he made Adam from the dirt. So in the same way, he made Christ and Mary's body. And a female human only has X chromosome. She doesn't have XY chromosome. She doesn't have the Y chromosome comes from the man. So if Christ was a man, then God created the Y chromosome parts for him. And only God can create. So therefore, no other angel could possibly create a human being and a woman. They don't have physical bodies, so they can't have sex with a human. If they took a wife, they couldn't have, it's not possible for them to have kids. So I'm like, all right, well, what are the sons of God? So later it says that through Christ we are all sons of God. And of course, in the context, sons of God is also, if you have a relationship with God, it's sons and daughters, okay? So it's not always just men or male. Typically, historically, woman is included in mankind. It's just women have extra parts and less parts so they can produce children. That is such an annoying noise. So, sons of God, daughters of men. So I researched it further, and what I found was that the sons of God are people and angels who have a relationship with God. In Job, it mentions, and I believe Job was, first you're like, well, Job reads kind of like fiction, but apparently there was a person named Job, and he's referred to in other places in the Bible, along with like Moses and Abraham. So apparently there was a person named Job, but like who wrote the book of Job? According to tradition, it was Moses. So it's the story telling about the sons of God went before God to present themselves, and Satan was among them. So in this verse, it separates Satan from the sons of God, and Satan means adversary, enemy. So he was with the group of supernatural beings that were going before God to report in like what's going on earth. So we have the context of humans. So who are the sons of God in Genesis? Upon further research, apparently the sons of God in Genesis were humans. Like after Adam and Eve sinned, they got kicked out of the garden and they had babies. But Adam and Eve, like, they personally had a relationship where they could like walk around the garden with God. So he manifested himself. He appeared to them in person, as he did with Moses on Mount Sinai and Abraham. So after we got kicked out of the garden, that didn't happen as much. So people didn't have a relationship with him, and apparently the society is separated into children of Seth and children of Cain, and children of Cain became Canaanites, or also, the tribe of man, apparently, from my research. And then people started praying to God and started having a relationship with God, including Enoch. They said men began to call upon the name of the Lord. So at this point, people started having a relationship with God, and these people, since they weren't called Christians yet, or Jews, or Hebrews, they were called sons of God. So people who had a relationship with God were called sons of God. And I had a huge problem with doctrinally, angels can't reproduce with humans. They're non-corporeal, they're supernatural, non-physical beings. So they would have to have a body to marry and have intercourse with a human to produce a baby. And then all spirits come from God, so an angel can't put a spirit into a baby, demigod or not. They would have to possess it themselves, right? But then you get to the point where only God creates something from nothing, a spirit and Y chromosomes. So it cannot be that sons of God were angels in that context, in that verse. And the old Hebrew, they didn't use punctuation. So sons of God saw the daughters of men, and they were fair, and they took wives. So that has to be one idea, one statement. They were giants, and they're men of legend. Well, I've been researching a lot of the pre-flood Earth, which apparently we had a ring around Earth. There was much more moisture and pressure and oxygen in the atmosphere. And we have plants and fossils to prove this, that things grew much bigger. So there were giants of all species. That's obvious. But what we don't know is how the human body performs in a perfect environment. If you're an athlete and you get supercharged with living your whole life without solar radiation degrading your body and getting a massive amount of oxygen so you can perform at super top condition, then of course you're going to be a legendary athlete. So the pre-flood humans could do amazing things that we can't do today. I was also thinking maybe even they could have taken a carpet, since the atmosphere was thicker, and glided around on it, nowadays we do glide, but the atmosphere is not even as thick as it was then. So it may have taken less to glide through the atmosphere then as it does now. But anyway, so that's my take on it. I'm a preacher's kid. I grew up reading the Bible, and until recently, I really never even heard of the Book of Enoch until recently. And my brother wanted to argue with me about it, and about Nephilim and the Watchers and all of this garbage. And he was showing me a hot weather balloon tumbling, not a hot weather balloon, but a weather balloon tumbling in the atmosphere with clouds going past it. And it was and that's clearly a weather balloon, and it's not moving really fast. It's tumbling in space there, and the clouds are moving under it, so it's not moving. And then there was this redacted radio conversation between some Navy pilots in a zone where I have worked in the United States Navy when I was in the Navy, and they're in a training area, and they were tracking something, and they were wow, what is going on? And it sounds like they're tracking a UFO. And yeah, it was a UFO, but it wasn't a space alien UFO. It was our stealth drone that we have. It doesn't take much to figure that out, what that was, but people were just so desperate to believe in space aliens or interdimensional beings that they just don't want to know the truth or face the truth. I mean, does it sound boring that angels can't have sex with humans and produce giants? Maybe it is kind of boring, but you can't put your faith in mythology and lies. And I find it is very interesting when humanity could do amazing things before the flood of Noah. You know, I find like applying the science, like what was the flaming sword spinning around the Garden of Eden with creatures in it? Well, that seems like that was the Northern Lights, because before the flood of Noah, the atmosphere was thicker, kind of like on Jupiter. Those polar lights are bigger than the Earth, and they're extremely powerful. And there's always like a more intense spot towards the sun, towards the east. And like other mythology kind of say that in the Northern Lights, it's foxes running, like fire foxes running around. And the Bible says it's cherubim, and a cherubim is a winged four-legged creature, so that kind of fits with what people see in the Northern Lights. So I find it more interesting to discover the truth than it is to believe in mythology and what is the word? Pseudepigrapha, the Book of Enoch, than to, you know, you don't want to put your faith or build a doctrine, false doctrine of lies. You want to put your faith in the truth, you know, because we all need the truth. We need a reality. We need to be grounded in a reality, in the truth of Christ dying for us. We're needing Him. Like one person sinned and caused us all to be under sin, and one person died to free us from being under sin. So the point of everything is, as a Christian, a son of God through Christ, is to share the gospel of Christ, that everyone can be redeemed and saved. And the things about UFOs and the Book of Enoch is just a distraction to take people's mind away from the truth of Christ, the truth, you know. So I hope people who took the time to listen to this learned something and benefited from this.